I am David Zeitlin from the University of Oxford. I have co-curated the exhibition Photo Cameroon Studio Portraiture 1970-1990s with Erica Jones from the Fowler Museum. In another presentation, I considered the family photos from the album of Jacques Toussele, one of the three photographers in the exhibition. There are many similar photos in the archives of all of the photographers in the show. As well as these quite conventional archives from the Toussele archive, there are some other intriguing examples of him appearing in his own photographs, either as a sort of studio prop or more like the filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock appearing in his own photographs, although they were commissioned by other people. In all such instances, the person actually operating the camera would have been one of his apprentices, people like Joseph Chilla. There are enough cases in the archive for it to be clear that this was not a passing one-off thing. He clearly liked doing this, but sadly I do not have a good explanation to give of why he did it. By the time I noticed the pattern, he was no longer there to ask. So, like all too many things arising from archival and ethnographic research, each discovery raises more questions than it answers. I also wonder what answer would be possible. If I asked, why did you do this? And he said, oh, because I liked to do it, or because it amused me, would I really know anything new? In a way, we already know this on the basis of the repeated instances of the photos. Some questions are easy to ask, but hard to answer meaningfully. The more important point is the contrast with the other photographers in the exhibition who did not do this sort of thing. So, in the archive is a photograph of a local policeman. A very similar set of ID-style photographs of a policeman was on display in the entrance to Jacques' studio. But if you look carefully, it shows Jacques himself dressed as a policeman. It was Jacques himself who pointed this out to me, and he also told me that an actual policeman complained about him pretending in the photograph. But this didn't seem to have stopped him displaying the image publicly at the entrance of the studio for many years. He seemed to enjoy having raised a bit of controversy, and thereby in some way having got one over on the police. Perhaps this gives a clue to what he would have said had I been able to ask him why he appears in so many of his own photos. Now, the police hat he was wearing seems to have been a studio prop, or at least it remained around the studio for a bit since it appears elsewhere in the archive. Now, we have space here only to include a few other examples. Among these are one from some photos commissioned to mark the opening of the Garden of Eden Chez Soul Pop. The sign mixes English and French, and this was a tailor's shop in the early 1980s. Although the photo with Jacques in it makes it look as though the Garden of Eden was a bar, I'm confident it was actually a tailor's shop, since another photo taken on the same occasion shows a woven dummy, and in the background inside the shop you can just make out a sewing machine. Among my favourites of Jacques appearing in his own photos is one of him with a proud new father, and another taken at a funerary celebration held traditionally several years after a death and known locally as a cry day. This is marked by traditional dancing, and here Jacques has joined a dancing group as they pose for the photographer. Yet another example comes from a very conventional wedding photograph, but who is that beside the happy couple? And here he is, on horseback, despite the fact he never had a horse, and in a uniform-style jacket, drinking with a friend. I leave you with two images. First is of an unknown man shaking hands with Jacques. Sometimes these were set up just to make it look like the client was a businessman doing a deal. Viewers must decide if that's what was happening here. And finally, here is an image of him posing with a sort of studio prop. For a period of time, they had a rope attached to the studio ceiling. Several clients posed with it, as he does here.